This is the story of Zumbi dos Palmares, Brazil's most famous freedom fighter. Between 1540 and 1860, Brazil imported some 5.5 million African slaves. Sadly, Brazil was the last country in the Western world to abolish slavery. It wasn't until 1888 that Princess Isabel de Bragança signed the Lei Áurea, or the Golden Law in Portuguese, that finally abolished slavery in Brazil. I mean, think about that. That was more than 20 years after shameful history was ended here in the United States. It would be an oversimplification to say that the overthrow of Pedro II shortly after the abolition of slavery in Brazil was the only reason. Pedro II basically was a good man, and he is still much honored in a lot of places in Brazil. However, the army played a part in it, the church played a part in it, and so far as the slavery part of it was concerned, the overthrow of Pedro II was heavily supported by the rich and powerful coffee barons who saw emancipation as the confiscation of their property. Many think that unlike most of the rest of the world, Brazil does not have a race problem. Unfortunately, it does. In present-day Brazil, the quest for racial justice is often called the resistência, or resistance in English, of course. This is the story of Zumbi dos Palmares, who fought against slavery in Brazil during the second half of the 17th century. Today, Zumbi is the symbol for Black resistance against both the slavery of his time and racial injustice in Brazil today. Proudly referring to Zumbi, the descendants of those slaves can now ask defiantly, "Who said we didn't resist our enslavement?" So who was this Zumbi dos Palmares, the present-day icon for this resistência? Zumbi was born free in Quilombo dos Palmares. A Quilombo was a community of runaway slaves secluded in the remote backcountry called the Mata. The Quilombo dos Palmares was founded around 1605. However, the name Palmares is not to be confused with the Portuguese word for palm trees, which is palmeiras. Palmeiras is a word that is often associated with Brazil itself because of a very famous poem that is near and dear to the hearts of many Brazilians that starts out, "My country has palm trees," or Palmeiras. Palmares was located in what is today the Portuguese state of Alagoas. Palmares was the largest quilombo in Brazil. At times, it had a population as high as 20,000 inhabitants. Its inhabitants established their own society and government, based on both Central African and Portuguese models. Palmares was led by a chief who was basically a monarch. The inhabitants of Palmares knelt before him and addressed him as Lord. Palmares was self-sufficient. Its inhabitants cultivated their own crops. They traded with nearby white communities. In the tradition of African kingdoms, Palmares even had its own slaves. Zumbi's mother's name was Sabina. Sabina was the sister of Gangazuma, who ended up being the leader of Palmares. They were brought to Brazil as slaves. It is said that Sabina and Gangazuma were the children of Princess Aquatun of the Congo. Princess Aquatun was the daughter of King Antonio of the Congo. In the Battle of Mapuila of 1665, the Portuguese executed King Antonio and killed 5,000 of his men. It is said the Portuguese captured his grandchildren, Gangazuma and Sabina. They were shipped to Brazil as slaves. Gangazuma and Sabina were sold to the plantation of Santa Rita in the then captaincy of Pernambuco. However, Gangazuma and Sabina soon escaped to Palmares. There, Sabina gave birth to Zumbi, However, slave traffickers captured Zumbi when he was only 6. Zumbi was turned over to Father Melo, who made him an acolyte. Under him, Zumbi was baptized into the Catholic Church. Father Melo taught Zumbi how to speak and read Portuguese. When Zumbi was 15, he managed to run away to Palmares, where his uncle Ganga Zumba had become the leader. Ganga Zumba received Zumbi with joy. Zumbi turned into a powerful warrior. The Portuguese constantly launched expeditions to try to conquer Palmares, but Palmares always fought them off. Zumbi fought valiantly in these battles. In 1678, the Portuguese governor, tired of the conflict, made Ganga Zumba a peace offer. The governor offered freedom to most of the inhabitants of Palmares. However, the Quilombo had to submit itself to Portuguese rule. Further, the most recently arrived fugitives had to be returned to their owners, and the residents of the Quilombo had to relocate to the Cacau Valley. Ganga Zumba, also tired of the conflict, accepted these terms. However, Zumbi opposed this accord vehemently. There were these problems with the accord. First of all, those residents who were supposed to return to slavery did not go willingly. And Zumbi did not think the Portuguese could be trusted, and it turned out he was right, because Portuguese officers began dividing up Quilombo land among themselves, and the Portuguese began returning to slavery those who had moved to the Cacau Valley. Soon, Ganga Zumba was poisoned, probably by the followers of Zumbi. Zumbi became the new leader of the Quilombo. Despite what his uncle had agreed to, Zumbi continued fighting the Portuguese for another 15 years. In 1693, there was a new Portuguese governor, and he decided he was going to deal with Palmares once and for all. So he engaged the Bandeiraci Domingos Jorge Velho to invade and destroy Palmares. The Bandeiracis were basically self-appointed militiamen. On February the 6th, 1694, the Bandeiracis of Domingos destroyed Palmares. Zumbi was wounded in the battle but managed to escape. Afterwards, Zumbi continued to struggle against the Portuguese for another 2 years, but a companion betrayed Zumbi to the Portuguese. Zumbi was captured. After Zumbi's capture, the Bandeiracis assassinated him on the still important date of November the 20th, 1695. Zumbi's head was taken to the Portuguese governor in Recife, who put it on display to disprove the myth of Zumbi's immortality. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Zumbi has 2 meanings in Brazil today. In contemporary Brazil, Zumbi has become the icon for the black resistance against the slavery of his time, but more than this, Zumbi also has become the symbol for the resistance against the inequality that many of today's Afro-Brazilians feel. Therefore, his legend is today much honored in numerous ways in Brazil. For instance, there are numerous statues of Zumbi in Brazil. A university in São Paulo is named in his honor. The date of his death, November the 20th, was initially designated Day of Zumbi in Brazil. However, in 2003, November the 20th was renamed National Day of Black Consciousness. That date is now commemorated as a holiday in many Brazilian states and cities. So for contemporary Afro-Brazilians, Zumbi represents their determination to resist the continuation of racial injustice that they feel in Brazil today. Thanks for watching.